Today, we're going to try and decode the really complex, vibrant social fabric of India. We're talking about those unwritten rules, the ones that guide our lives, from tiny little daily gestures all the way up to these profound beliefs that shape entire communities. So what are these invisible scripts that we're all following? Let's dive in and find out.
All right, so where do we even begin with something this huge? Let's start with a mystery that's kind of hidden in plain sight. You'll find it in the everyday things we all do, often without even thinking about it.
Yeah, think about it for a second. You shake someone's hand. An elder's feet are touched. A married woman wears vermilion. What are these acts, really? Are they just habits? Things passed down through generations? Or just social norms we follow without question? Or, and this is the interesting part, could there be something deeper going on? A much more structured, more meaningful system behind what we do every single day?
Okay, and this right here brings us to a really crucial distinction. On one side, you've got a custom. Think of shaking hands. It's a social tradition, right? But then, when that custom has to be done in a very, very specific way, a way that isn't really logically connected to the outcome, well, that's when it crosses over into something else. It becomes a ritual, like walking around a fire a certain number of times at a wedding. There's a prescribed way to do it, and that's what makes it a ritual, not just a custom.
So that begs the question, right? If these rituals aren't always rational in a straightforward A to B kind of way, then why are they so powerful? Why are they so incredibly important and persistent in pretty much every society around the world? I mean, what purpose are they actually serving?
Well, the anthropologist Edmund Leach had a really great way of explaining this. He basically said a ritual is any predictable action that you can't justify with a simple, rational explanation. So planting a potato, that's rational. You do it to get more potatoes. But shaking hands, that's a ritual. The action itself doesn't produce anything, but man, it carries a ton of social meaning.
So what jobs do these rituals actually do for a society? Well, turns out they do a whole lot of heavy lifting. First, they socialize us. They literally teach us how to belong. They also act as a form of social control, reinforcing those unwritten rules. Rituals can give us merit and status. They help identify us. I mean, think about a wedding ring. It's a perfect example. And of course, they can serve our deepest spiritual and even our psychological, therapeutic needs. And here's the thing. These super powerful rituals, they're never more visible, never more important than when they're marking the biggest transitions in our lives. We're talking about a journey, from the very beginning all the way to the very end. So let's start that journey right at the beginning. Birth and childhood. We'll look at the customs and rituals that welcome a brand new life into the world and, just as importantly, into the community.
And it starts literally from day one. These rituals are there to establish faith and build those community bonds. For example, among Muslims, the first words a baby might hear are the azan, the call to prayer, whispered in its ear. Then there's the head-shaving ceremony, the mundan, which is super common for both Hindus and Muslims. And of course, the namkarana, or naming ceremony. That's a huge deal for more than 3,400 communities.
Okay, so after birth, the next big step is initiation. This is the formal process of actually joining the religious and social community. And what's interesting here is that a lot of these rituals tend to focus specifically on boys.
And you can see this across different faiths, each marking this transition in its own way. For instance, for many high-caste Hindu boys, there's the sacred thread ceremony. For Muslim boys, it's circumcision. For Christians, it's baptism in the church. See? The rituals are all unique, but the purpose? It's pretty much the same. To show that a boy has formally entered his religious community.
All right, next up, marriage. This is probably one of the most socially significant, most ritual-heavy events in anyone's life. It really is a cornerstone of community and family.
And you can really see just how important marriage is from all the rituals that surround it. I mean, priests are involved almost universally, right? That gives the whole thing a divine stamp of approval. And after the ceremony, a woman's new status is often immediately visible, thanks to powerful symbols like vermilion, the Mangal Sutra, or even toe rings.
And that brings us to the end of the journey, to the rituals that surround death. These ceremonies are incredibly revealing. They tell us so much about a community's deepest beliefs about life, death, and of course, what might come after.
One thing you see almost everywhere in India is this idea that death causes a kind of ritual pollution. Now, how the body is handled, cremation, which is common in Hinduism, or burial, common in Islam and Christianity, that reflects core beliefs. But no matter the method,
The goal is consistent, to bring peace to the soul of the person who's passed, and to help the living manage this huge transition through very specific prayers and observances on certain days, like the 3rd, 10th, or 40th day.
Okay, so we've been talking about how these rituals shape our individual lives, but it doesn't stop there. When a whole bunch of people share the same system of beliefs and rituals, they start to form distinct groups. And that's where we get into the ideas of cults and sects.
So let's zoom out a bit. We've seen how rituals mark our personal journey through life. Now, the bigger question is, how did they create the fabric of these much larger social groups and identities all across India?
Now, you've probably heard people use the words cult and sect like they mean the same thing. But, in sociology, they actually mean very different things. So let's clear that up right now.
So here's the key difference. On the one hand, you have a cult. A cult is usually a new movement, often built around one charismatic person, and its membership can be pretty fluid. A great example is ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement. On the other hand, you have a sect. A sect is a group that actually breaks away from a bigger, established religion, often as a form of protest. It's a voluntary group of believers, and sometimes it can even grow into a formal religion of its own. Just think about the Sunnis and Shias in Islam. That's a perfect example of a sect.
And understanding that difference between a cult and a sect is so important. Because this whole process of sect forming and branching off, well, that's what has created the incredibly diverse and rich spiritual tapestry we see in India today.
I mean, just look at Hinduism. The diversity is absolutely staggering. You've got these huge Vaishnava sects that worship Vishnu and the Shaiva sects that worship Shiva. But then you also have groups like the Lingayats, who are a protest movement that broke away from caste traditions, and even more extreme groups like the Aghoris. Every single one has its own unique philosophy and its own set of rituals. And it's the same story when you look at India's other major religions. Islam has that fundamental split between Sunnis and Shias. In Sikhism, you have groups like the Nirankaris and Namdaris. Buddhism has the Hinayana and Mahayana branches. Jainism has the Digambara and Swetambara. It just goes on and on. And at the end of the day, each one of these sects is basically a community's unique answer to life's biggest questions.
And we really have to remember what we've talked about today. Every ritual, every sect, it's just scratching the surface. It's like looking at a single grain of sand on a massive beach. The real complexity that defines social and religious life in India is just immense. So that leaves us with one last really big question to think about. In a nation that is defined by this incredible, mind-boggling diversity of ancient rituals and unique identities, how does it all work? How do all of these different threads manage to weave themselves together to form the single, complex, modern nation of India? I think that's the enduring mystery, isn't it?